this is Tyler Austin from Gungnir Strategic. Thank you so much for watching. And if you are watching this, you've probably subscribed to either my player or my Patreon channel, and for that, I thank you very much. In this video, I'm going to be going over single pointing versus dual pointing hallways. So let's quickly define a few terms here. So a hallway has two long major walls that run both on the left and the right-hand side of the hallway. So when a team is single stacked on a hallway, it means there is technically only one point man, and that point man, along with the rest of the stack, is moving along only one of those walls. So they're either moving only on the left-hand side or the left-hand wall or on the right-hand side wall. When a team is dual pointed on a hallway, it means that there are technically 2 point men, 1 point man on the left-hand wall and 1 point man on the right-hand wall. And you may also be running 2 separate stacks along both sides of the hallway as well, depending on the situation and the context. In this video, I'm going to give you just the general principles and concepts as to why you may choose to single point or dual point a hallway. Now, just to be clear, there can be a lot of exceptions to these principles I'm going to show you, especially when it comes to very complex hallways, but the general principle still applies in terms of your general idea of when you want to single point versus dual point. Now, with all that being said, why would we choose to single point a hallway? Well, as a general principle, we're going to single point a hallway when all the angles of exposure and danger areas lie on only one side of the hall. So let's say all of the doorways and all the angles of exposure are on the left-hand side of the hallway. At that point, we're more than likely going to single point on the left-hand side of the hallway. This is to avoid overlapping angles of exposure. I'll demonstrate that here in a second. As for dual pointing, we use this when there are angles of exposure and danger areas located on both sides of the hallway, necessitating cross coverage. Now, like I already said in the beginning of the video, there are a lot of exceptions to this, of course. However, this is going to be the general guiding principle that is going to drive a team to choose whether to single point or dual point. So now let's look at a few examples in Door Kickers 2, which I'm going to use for demonstration. Here we have a hallway that eventually leads to a T-section, and of course that T-section has dead space and therefore angles of exposure on both sides of the hallway. This is a classic example of where you would want to dual point a hallway because there are angles of exposure on both sides of the hallway, therefore necessitating cross coverage. Both of these guys would work up the hallway, maintaining good cross coverage until they reach a point where they need to exchange their angles and then clear the rest of the uncleared dead space. When they stop and how they perform the exchange is beyond the scope of this video, but rest assured I'll have future videos on that topic. Now let's look at one more example for cross coverage. Here we have a hallway with an open door both on the left and right hand side of the hallway. Therefore, there are angles of exposure from both sides of the hallway, necessitating cross coverage. These two guys would work up the hallway, maintaining their cross coverage until they reach an exchange point, at which point they would exchange their angles, continue to slice out the rooms, and then make entry. Now let's look at examples of where you'd want to use single pointing. In this example, we have both an L-shaped hallway that feeds left, as well as an open doorway on the left-hand side of the hallway. Therefore, all the angles of exposure are from the left-hand side of the hallway. This is an example where we want to single stack, and in this case, single stack left. There are different ways to single stack hallways. You can just run a single point man. You can run a point man wingman like shown here, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Regardless, in this example, as the stack is moving up the hallway, eventually the point man is going to reach that open door, and he's going to begin to work the open door while his wingman is maintaining for security, and then entry is made. Now, the reason why we would choose to single point this hallway over dual point it is simply because of overlapping angles of exposure. There's a lot of overlapping angles of exposure here, especially the closer you get to the far wall. If this team was dual stacked on this hallway, the man on the far wall would be exposing himself to angles both from the L shape and from within the room. And he can only effectively cover one of those angles at a time, in which case he'd be covering the angles from the doorway. However, he would not be able to work the angles and effectively clear the angles from the L shape simultaneously. Nor can any of his teammates cover those angles. So by doing this, he's placing himself in very dangerous overlapping angles of exposure. I have a video specifically on this topic called the limited exposure principle or the single exposure principle. To wrap this video up, let's go ahead and just go over quickly a common exception to this rule. And in this case, we removed that open door and that room, so now we only have an L-shaped hallway. Still, all the angles of exposure on one side of the hallway left in this case. However, there is only one angle of exposure, and that comes from the dead space created by the L-shaped hallway. In this case, you can dual point and have the guy working the deep wall work those angles from the depth, or you could single point and work it closer towards the apex. Neither is wrong and will be dictated by team SOP, the context, situation, etc. But the reason why this is okay to dual point is because there is no overlapping angles of exposure, because there's only one angle exposure to work, i.e. the dead space created by the L shape. Anyways, I hope you found this video helpful and informative. I'm Tyler Austin from Gungnir Strategic. Thank you so much for watching.